Well, hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. John Kirkpatrick is an English musician who plays free reed instruments like the button, accordion, concertina, and melodeon. He has been a vital member playing in the folk genre since 1959. John has enjoyed a long and distinguished career with well-known bands such as Albion Country Band, Steeleye Span, and backing Richard Thompson. He's played with the likes of Ashley Hutchings and Martin Carthy and has formed several units over the years, including Shrophshire Bedlams, Brass Monkey, Sultans of Squeeze, his own band, the John Patrick Band, and playing with his four sons in Kirkophany. He has recorded with Pere Ubu, Viv Stanshall, Gerry Rafferty, and Maddy prior, to name just a few. Beginning in 1993, John has recorded and released 7 solo albums. Mr. Kirkpatrick has also produced one of the only teaching videos for the melodeon and offers one-on-one lessons on playing the instruments he plays and workshops on playing for Morris dancing. Well, welcome, John.
Thank you, Greg. Good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this and taking time out to do this.
It's a pleasure. So my first correction.
Okay. All right. Sure.
You said you mentioned the year 1993 for recording. In fact, I've started recording in about 1970.
Okay.
You missed out a few hundred. There's a few hundred albums before 1993.
Okay. All right.
Otherwise, carry on. I sound fabulous, so keep going.
You sound fabulous. All right. Well, thanks for that. Well, take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in West London, Chiswick in West London in 1947. And all my family loved music. There were no professional musicians, but everybody sang. There was a piano in the house. Everybody played a bit, and sing. You know, every family party or family gathering involved a sing-song around the piano. So music, all my life. You know, from before I can remember. So, just music in all directions, and not folk music, which is what I do now, but just the love of singing and the love of music was just part of life, from the go.
Right. I've heard that too. Even like the McCartney household, gathered around the piano.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you said, so many families did that if they had a piano.
yeah. When I was a kid, I think probably, it was. I was going to say most people would have had a piano. That's probably not quite true, but it was certainly not uncommon, to go into somebody's front room and see the piano,
Right. Well, what was the first musical instrument you learned to play?
I suppose it probably was the piano because it was just there in the room. I started learning the recorder at primary school, junior school, because all kids have to do that, But in fact, I got one older sister, and my sister and I can remember we played recorded duets, and we kind of represented our school at different times in various musical festivals and what have you. I can remember playing in the Royal Albert Hall when I was still at primary school, and I'd be about 10, along with about 3,000 other children. So, we covered each other's bum notes. But I can remember that, that was quite an amazing experience for a young lad.
Oh yes, it would be. You're right. Well, how about can you remember one of the first singles or albums that you bought yourself?
I can remember when my mum and dad bought a record player,
Uh-huh.
uh, and they gave my sister and me an LP each. So my sister had Peter and the Wolf, an LP of Peter and the Wolf, and on the other side it was The Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra by Benjamin Britten, and I had Handel's Messiah because I was, my sister and I both sang in the church choir by then,
Right.
and
Right.
we'd sung the Messiah quite a few times. Most years we would sing the Messiah in church, so That was my first recording was Handel's Messiah.
How about some bands and musicians that you were starting to get into as like a teenager?
Okay, well, my musical path was kind of a bit strange, really, because but at the age where most young people would be, rocking out to popular bands of the day, I'd already discovered folk music and the squeeze
Yeah,
box and Morris dancing, and I was just mildly obsessed with it, really. So,
yeah.
I'd completely missed out on all the teenage activities like beating up old ladies and stuff. I was just working away on my squeeze box and Morris dancing with my mates, and it. So I was listening to lots of traditional music, English folk music, and meeting other Morris dance type bit people and lots of folk dance people, and singing folk songs. It was a long time, and all live stuff. I wasn't really
Yeah,
listening to records of it particularly at that point.
right.
Um, I suppose if eventually I kind of succumbed to the Beatles. I suppose, I'm a huge Beatles fan. I still think they're amazing.
Yeah,
And
right.
gradually I'd sort of got involved in other forms of popular music.
Right.
I can remember the first Beatles single that I bought was Lady Madonna, which is
Oh,
quite late in their work. But I know within a year I bought everything else that they'd done up to then.
right, right. Well,
Yeah.
go back to for the viewers that are not familiar with Morris dancing. Uh, First, tell a little bit about it, and then also how you were first introduced to Morris dancing.
Okay, well, Morris dancing is a traditional English folk dance, historically usually done by men only, although in the last 50 years, masses of women are doing Morris dancing as well. Uh, Traditional art form, it's been uh, traced back to the 1400s in this country. Uh, and to begin with, there were similar dances in other parts of Europe, Northern Europe especially. And you can see parallels between other sorts of ceremonial dancing from other parts of the world. But mainly it's a kind of young men showing off their fabulous dancing skills and fitness and adeptness at twirling handkerchiefs or sticks or swords and weaving them into patterns and banging each other over the head. And it's and there was a huge impetus in collecting and reviving folk music in England towards the end of the 19th century and into the 20th, and lots of lots of the people at work collecting and gathering folk songs and folk tunes and dances became quite obsessed about Morris dancing because it's so spectacular, and there was enough of it around to pick it up and revive it. And all through the 20th century, there was a gradual growth of interest in these old dances, and particularly after the Second World War in the 50s and 60s, that really gained impetus. And the way I got into it was that, as I said, my sister and I were singing in the church choir. My parents went to the church, and uh, this was in Hammersmith in West London, and somebody who'd been into the church realised that there were lots of family groups going to the church for the services, and there was a youth club, and there was a women's group and a men's group, and various groups for people who went to the church. It's quite a big church with quite a big congregation, but there wasn't anything socially for people to do together in all the different groups. And somebody had done some country dancing when they were a kid and said, hey, let's form a country dance group. So they got in touch with Cecil Sharp House, which is the headquarters of the English Folk Dance and Song Society, and they sent somebody along to teach us country dancing. I was 12. I hated it. I'd had to do country dancing at primary school, and
Yeah.
holding girls' hands and all that stuff was just nauseating, and I really didn't like it. But
Yeah.
then but so I went along under sufferance, and it wasn't really my thing at all at that age. But the chap who came to teach the dancing saw all these sort of families, all these young lads, said, "Aha, lots of young blokes here. I'll start a Morris team." And in the first week, somebody broke a finger in a stick dance. So I thought, this sounds more like it. So I went along on week 2, and I was lost. It was fabulous. I loved it, and
Yeah.
I've been Morris dancing ever since. Among all the other things that I do, I still Morris dance now. I'm far too old, but I'm 77 now. But I love it. It's great. It's a gloriously exhilarating exercise. When the music and the dancing come together and everything goes well, which happens about one time in a million. It's just
Right.
you just soar, and you're off
I,
on another kind of plane. But and loads of teams have come and gone since I got involved. So 1959, the year you mentioned earlier, that's when I started Morris dancing. I
oh,
became, and met folk music and became obsessed with it, really.
okay. One more question. Morris, was that named after an individual or an area of England? Do you,
No,
do you know?
in fact, nobody knows why it's called Morris dancing.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
there's various versions of the word. Moresque, Moorish, as in like
The
blackamoor,
Moors. Yeah.
Moors, yeah, or mores from the Latin word mores, meaning customs. All sorts of theories abound, but
Okay.
nobody's come up
You know
with
what?
the definitive um, explanation for why this
Oh,
stuff is
well,
called Morris dancing. Uh,
okay. Well,
Nothing to do with anybody called Morris or Morris Motor Cars.
okay. Not after the car. That's good. Well, that will segue right into Hammersmith Morris Men. Was that your first band?
Hammersmith Morris Men was the group that I joined, yeah, in this after I'd heard somebody broke a finger. Uh,
Okay.
so that's excuse me. So it's not a band, it's just a bunch of people who go out and dance around the streets at pubs and in town squares and that sort of thing. There are probably about 16 of us, maybe something like that. And to begin with, we had a friend of the founder of the team came and played a button accordion for the dancing, and then gradually people in the group started learning instruments to play themselves, and so we became self-sufficient. And so I started playing the instruments I play, the various sorts of squeeze box for Morris dancing, along with various other people in the group as well. And we used to dance around we used to organise pub tours around our part of London, go to Morris dance weekends in other parts of the country, folk festivals, and just dance our pants off.
Well, how long were you with Hammersmith Morris Men?
I stayed with them until I left London. So I left London in 1972 for about 12 years.
Okay, okay,
And for a few of those years, I was promoted to become the leader of the team for a year, and did the teaching for about 3 years. I taught the team.
okay,
Because
okay.
it totally consumed me really at a certain point in my teens, and I tried to find out everything you could know about Morris dancing.
Well, next up was Dingle's Chili Bomb Band.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this group of mates, the Country Dance Club that was originally formed as a church group, it very quickly became a self-sufficient thing as well, and severed any connections with the church. And it was a very popular thing. And after a while, after I'd been playing for a while, I was asked to lead a scratch band once a month. We'd have dance callers come along and teach the dancing, and have musicians or bands come to be booked. And then quite a few people were playing instruments and interested in playing. So I got the job of leading a scratch band once a month at this Hammersmith Country Dance Club. And then we got asked to go and play in other places. So we had to think of a name then. So uh, Chili Bomb Bomb, there was a hit record by a group called the Pasadena Roof Orchestra, who are an English trad jazz group. called Chili Bom Bom. You are my chili bom bom, my chili bom bom, my chili bom bom loves me. Or, sort of daft 1920s sort of thing. And I
Yeah.
thought, what a great word. And I thought, I don't know where Dingle came from, but we call ourselves Dingle's Chili Bomb Band. So that was a band for playing for country dancing, which lasted, a few years, I suppose.
Okay. Well, how talk about how you and Ashley Hutchings met.
Okay, right. I started a folk club in London. There were lots of the folk club movement was growing. This is so that we're in the 1960s now, towards the end of the 1960s, I suppose. And there was there was a time when there was a folk club almost on every street corner in
Yeah.
England. And I started one in the middle of London. And the Dingle's Chili Bomb Band used to play. We used to be there. We started off with a few tunes, and if there were enough people, a bit of dancing before we had the song part of the evening. And I was doing an evening of. I asked the librarian from Cecil Sharp House, the English Folk Dance and Song Society, if they'd come and show some old films. Rather than having a guest singer, we had a guest film. And so as the librarian came along to show us a few snippets of old archive films of old musicians, old dancers, old singers. It was rather daft idea. But one of the people who came along was Ashley Hutchings. He'd heard about it, and he
Yeah.
came along, and he liked the band. It's the first time we'd met, and he wrote me a letter after that saying he had three things he was considering doing. He was doing a tour with Shirley Collins, who he was married to at the time. Would I be in the band? He wanted to make a record of Morris dance music with a kind of folk rock backing. He'd been in Fairport and he'd been in Steeleye and he'd left them, and he wanted to do something more specifically English,
Yeah.
whereas his previous bands had covered lots of Scottish and Irish stuff.
Yeah.
And I've forgotten what the third thing was, but so I did the tour with Shirley, and we met up to rehearse an album which became called Morris On, which we recorded in 1971.
Right.
And so that was the first time I'd worked with Ashley, and the band included Dave Maddox on drums, who'd been in Fairport, Ashley on bass, Richard Thompson on guitar, and Barry Dransfield on fiddle. And so that's the first time I played with Richard Thompson, and that I thought it was a stupid idea because I'd been doing Morris dancing for 12 or 13 years by then, and I thought, well, all the people I know in the whole world all do Morris dancing or play it or interested in it. Who'd buy a record of Morris dance music? It turns out it's one of the most popular records of English folk music there's ever been.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what do I know? But a great experience to do that, and wonderful. Put me in the room with Richard, which was a great long-lasting legacy.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you never know when at the time you're doing something like that if it's going to catch on or not. Like you
yeah,
said,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
You
That's
know.
right. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you're reading my mind there. That's a good thing. I was going to ask you who else played on the album, and you
Oh,
just
okay.
mentioned that. That's good. That's good. See that means we're vibing here.
Okay.
So the there you go. The same year, 72, you recorded your first solo album, "Jump at the Sun,"
Yeah.
and Richard played on that one.
Yes. Yeah. He'd done a huge number of sessions, recording sessions. He left Fairport by then, um, and he didn't particularly want to have his name on yet another album. So he called himself Agnes Mirren on the sleeve notes. And so because he wanted to use a different name,
Yeah.
Ashley wanted to be somebody else as well. So Ashley Hutchings also played in it, and he was Humphrey de Etchingham. Etchingham was the village he was living in at the time. And so the two of them played on a song I did, just one song on my album, a traditional song called "The Widow of Westmoreland's Daughter," and yeah, so that was fun to do. Uh,
So,
yeah,
so
have you heard
Richard,
that? Do you know that album? Have you heard it?
Yes, I have heard. Yes,
Oh,
I heard some
my
tracks
God,
off
yeah.
it. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So Richard decided to change his name and also have a sex change at the same time.
Yes, yes, yes. You know, he's got a great sense of humor, and he
Yeah.
just thought it'd be more fun to be someone else.
Yes, yes. It is a nice album. You're very, very, very well. I think it was pretty well received as well. That's what I'm trying
I,
to
I,
say.
I don't know. You know, I feel as though I probably tried to do too many different things on it. You know, it was for a guy called Bill Leader who had a record company called Trailer.
Yeah,
He recorded traditional musicians, and the label was called Leader. And then he recorded some revival people like me, and he called that album the label was called Trailer, Leader and Trailer. um, uh, and he said, don't just do a straight recital of stuff you do if you start up in a folk club or at a concert. You know, you use the recording studio to do as a chance to do different stuff. And
yeah,
I think probably now I try to do too much different stuff. Um, I know that I got a choir to come and sing. I'd done a music a vocal arrangement of a selection of Morris dance tunes on it, which is, you know, quite a bizarre thing to want to do in the first place. And then I record and to put on an album as well. And I did some double tracking and stuff, which was quite fun, which I'd never done before. Uh, and also, you know, it was my first outing, so although we recorded Morris On about the same time. I think
yeah.
I'd started it before Morris On and I finished it after Morris On. Uh, and I think I was slightly overambitious, but you know, it's fun. I quite enjoy listening to some of it. I
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
believe my singing from that time. You know, I got the real nasal English folky twang. You know,
yeah.
well, tell you what, you know, it sounds
Yes,
horrific. You know.
right. That's right. Well, it was of its time, like you said, you know.
Sure, yeah, it was,
Yeah,
yeah, and such a thrill for anyone to want to record you. You know, just
right,
even if
right.
I only had a copy to give to my mum. You know, it's so exciting to get in the studio and do all that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that too. In the studio, do you remember the recording sessions and how they went?
Well, it was done in bits. You know, some
Yeah,
of it I did in Bill Leader's front room, which is where most of his records were made.
yeah.
Uh, the choir we recorded in Cecil Sharp House. We were standing in because he had a studio in Cecil Sharp House at that time, and that's where we recorded uh, Richard and Ashley. They came and played their bits there, not in Bill's front room.
Right.
I think I did a few of the tracks in the studio at Cecil Sharp House, and the choir we recorded standing around the canteen, which is a nice echoey space.
Ah, right,
It was
right.
quite complicated. So there are a few different places we used, and then I wanted to do a multi-tracked thing with just my voice, and we recorded that in a studio in Barnet, just that one track. So it was a bit bits and bobs all over the place, and you know, fascinating to sort of see what you could do and how it all worked in a studio. You know, uh,
Right.
and I think I'd done some. I'd been on albums before that, but recorded live. You know, there was
Yeah.
a live recording from Townsley Folk Festival, which I was on. But it was just a live recording of a concert spot. You know, it wasn't like in a studio.
Right, right. Well, and the following year in '73, you moved to Shropshire and got
Yeah,
married.
yeah. I got married a couple of years before that, but yeah, I married. In fact, I met Sue Harris. We met on a Morris dance tour when I was still in London. Uh, some friends of hers were folky people, and she just finished a college course, and these friends of hers dragged her along. They thought she might enjoy it, and we hit it off and started going out, and we got married in 1971 actually, and then we began making music together. She just qualified as a primary school teacher and with specializing in music, so she was a very good piano player, and she'd also started playing the oboe, and she sang. And
Oh, I love the oboe. That's one of my favorite instruments, the oboe.
oh
Yeah.
right, yeah. Well, it's quite it was quite unusual to play the oboe in English folk music.
Yeah.
It still is really. There are very few oboe players. It's all squeeze box and fiddles and
Right.
bagpipes and what have you, but not
Not a
other
lot.
clarinets and saxophones are much more common, than
Right.
oboe, which is a shame because it's a lovely sound.
Yes, it is a lovely sound.
And we started working together as a duo, and uh, we ended up living in Shropshire, and I'm still in Shropshire now. We've parted ways, although strangely enough, this year I think we played together for about 10, 15 years maybe, and we made 5 albums together and played in various bands, and we, fell apart, and we hadn't played together for about 35 years, but this year we've played together again for the first time.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Was it just like yesterday? Was it like the
No.
magic still? Yeah.
No, it wasn't. Uh, a lot of waters passed under a lot of bridges, and
Right.
it was fun to do it. We did a gig at a local festival
Yeah.
that we both played at before separately, and we just thought it would be time to bury a few hatchets, and be nice, and that's almost worked. And we were at Sidmouth Folk Festival a week or so ago, and we played a spot there, and we've got
Okay.
another concert coming up in a few weeks'
Oh,
time.
all right.
So I don't think we're going to be generally available, but it was nice to explore some of that stuff again.
Right.
Sadly,
Right.
you'll be devastated to hear Sue doesn't play the oboe anymore.
Oh no.
She's
Oh
taken
no.
up the hammered dulcimer.
Hammered dulcimer. That's another instrument I like. I like that.
Yeah, and she's very good at that. That's her main thing now.
Right, right. I like that because it's more like playing the drums is what it is, that it takes that kind of talent. Yeah, you
It's
know.
it's it's a fantastic sound, yeah,
Yes, it
and,
is. Well,
and
well,
she's very good at it as well.
yeah. Well, what was Martha Roden's Tuppeny dish?
Martha Roden's Tuppenny Dish.
Yes, yes.
Well, I had been Morris dancing since I was 12, and then uh, that sort of stopped when I left London, and we lived in Wolverhampton in the Midlands for about 18 months before we landed in Shropshire. And then once we'd moved to Shropshire, we were looking up local traditions of song and music and dance, in this area, which had been fairly underexplored in the national English folk scene. And we're discovering stuff. And there was this local version of Morris dancing, which is usually referred to as Border Morris because we're close to the border with Wales. It's not a great name, but so after a while we started Morris team, and at our first practice, uh, um, it was mainly blokes. There were some young lads who or what the way it came out is quite a good story actually. So I'd been in Shropshire for a while. I was going to the local folk club, excuse me, in a place called Ludlow, and met a few people there. And one of them was a teacher at the local secondary school, and he was a bit of a folkie, not kind of avid, but he was just interested, and he used to take his sixth formers to York, in the north of England, beautiful historical city, and take them to the local folk club, so they had a taste of folk music, and then somebody was organising a local May Fair in a place called Clun, which is just a few miles away from where we are now, and invited what was the best Morris team in the country at the time, who were called the Gloucestershire Old Spot Morris Dancers. And they came and did a spot, and these sixth formers who'd been to the folk club and had had a vague taste of folk music asked their teacher where they could do this sort of stuff, and he said to me, "You know about Morris dancing, where can my sixth formers learn Morris dancing?" So I thought, aha, I'll teach them. so so I immediately tried to find out everything I could about this local sort of dancing, Border Morris, and
Yeah.
there's not much. There's a certain amount of information, but it's not very complete or interesting. So, being a rather I was being, being rather arrogant in my tastes and needs and desires. I made most of it up, and nobody knew otherwise. So we started. That was Morris team. Sorry, I'm wiggling about. A
That's right.
Morris team called the Shropshire Bedlams.
Yeah.
Bedlams is an old word for that had been applied to Morris dancing in this part of the world. Specifically, dances with sticks. Bedlam Morris is
Okay.
historical name, and at this first meeting, first practice we had, one of the young lads brought his girlfriend along, and so we said to the girl, well, no, if encourage your other female friends to come along, there might be enough to have a women's team as well. And very quickly there were. And so Shropshire Bedlams was a team of men, and Martha Roden's Tuppenny Dish was the name of the team of women. And we started practicing in 1975 and danced out the year later. And so next year we will have been going for 50 years.
Is that
And
right?
miraculously, I'm still dancing. Sue started Martha Roden's Tuppenny Dish. That was her team, but she stopped after about 12 years or so. She sort of lost interest in it. Uh, but curiously, I'm now married to that girl who came along at the first practice.
Is that
So
right?
rather sweet sort of circular little journey there.
That is, yeah, very, very much. Well, that's interesting. Is it still popular with the women, the Morris
Yeah,
dancing?
still
Okay.
going strong. Yeah, yeah. They've been, a lot of Morris teams now who started about that same time.
Yeah.
Uh, are, struggling for members because everyone turns into an old git sooner or later, and
Yeah.
it's quite hectic, energetic stuff. And unless you're very lucky with your genes, the knees give out and all that sort of thing. But we've always been lucky with numbers. Lots of family groups within the two teams. Mothers and fathers of younger people in drag their kids along, and then by the time the kids are old enough to have a go, they've seen it all their lives, so they
Yeah.
know it straight away. So it's great. This next weekend we're dancing at a folk festival in Shrewsbury, which is the county town for Shropshire. And our two teams have been there going there every year for quite a few years, and we've got about over 20 blokes from the Shropshire Bedlams and about 25 from Martha Roden's Tuppenny Dish. So we're doing really well. It's miraculous, really.
Well, it's great that they're carrying that tradition on, like you said.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's great. It's still alive and well.
very
Well,
much so. Yeah.
I wanted to go back to 73. You played
Okay.
on the final Albion Country Band's album, Battle of
Oh,
the Field.
yeah,
Yeah, but then it took 3 more years for the album to see a release.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, like 76. I have a copy of that on CD.
right.
Do you remember the songs Albion Sunrise
Yeah,
and I Was a Young Man? Those are my two favorite picks off of that album. Those
okay, yeah. It was yeah. We recorded the album. We were only together for about 8 months, and we did a few gigs, a few foreign trips. Uh, Not much, and it wasn't it wasn't a wildly happy band, and we couldn't get a great deal of work, and we made the album, but by the time we were making the album, we'd already decided to pack up because we just weren't getting enough gigs to be a viable unit, and
yeah.
also Ashley Hutchings had two versions of the Albion Country Band in the year before that and spent most of the money. spent most of his funds. So
Yeah,
we made the album, and then the record company knew we were breaking up, so that's why it didn't come out because the band broke up. But then I think later on, Ashley had other bands and Albion bands sort of appeared, and they thought
right.
it was kind of a good thing to do.
Yeah, right. There was the Albion Band and then the Albion Country Band. Yeah,
Yeah,
at least two.
The Albion Country Band came first,
Yeah, Yeah.
And then we packed up and he formed a different group called the Etchingham Steam Band, which is an acoustic band. But then eventually the Albion name came back originally as the Albion Dance Band, playing for dances and as well as concerts. And then they were doing more and more concerts, so they dropped the dance and it just became the Albion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, go ahead. Go ahead. Do you have something else you were going to say? Go ahead. I didn't mean to.
What was I going to say? I remember that at the original recording sessions for the Albion Country Band album,
Yeah.
Battle of the Field, Martin Carthy sang a song which was more or less unaccompanied with us joining in the chorus. And he had recorded it himself later on a solo album. So so Sue and I recorded a track in 1976. It's a harvest song called Reap Hook and Sickle.
Okay.
That so that was to replace Martin didn't want his song to be on it, and
Okay.
it was, and we kind of it was a song we kind of threw together in the studio, and it wasn't very exciting or engaging, and he'd developed it further himself later, so we scrapped that, and Sue and I recorded a song which I think was mainly just the two of us, so I'm not sure if Dave Mattox might have been dragged in to play a bit of percussion.
Yeah.
So,
Dragged in. Yeah.
yeah.
I was going to say
Yeah.
dragged in, kicking and screaming. Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And what I remember, yes, he was there, because what I remember was Dave Mattox had trained as a piano tuner in his younger days, and
Okay.
Sue had just got this hammered dulcimer which she played on this song, and
Yeah.
she was still getting the hang of tuning it, and he dived in and tuned it up for her because
Uh,
he'd done tuning as a piano tuner. It isn't what you expect of a folk rock drummer.
no,
It's
no, it
quite a
isn't.
skill to have.
No, it isn't.
Yeah,
No, it isn't.
yeah, so
No.
that's right, slightly
Like,
odd.
yeah. Well, in '74, you and Ashley produced an album, The Complete Dancing Master, which is spelled Compleat. Complete.
Yes, yeah.
What was the
It's
subject matter of that
Oh,
album?
well, it was as Morrison had been Morris dance music with a folk rock backing, the Complete Dancing Master was English country dance music with a folk rock backing, and lead, uh, the lead instruments of the tunes were authentic to the period. So we were doing tunes from 16th century onwards, So we had crumb horns and a few medieval instruments. And squeeze box fiddle, hammer dulcimer, not played by Sue, played
Yes.
by somebody else, and various uh, instruments to show it was it's an interesting record because it's quite a historical range of
Right.
country dancing through the ages, with a few actors reading relevant descriptions of dancing and stuff from various periods in history. So it was a great thing
Right.
to do. Uh,
That's
and like Morrison, we didn't do any of this live. We just put the material together for the studio album. And there were a huge number of people on the Complete Dancing Master, and it's spelt like that because there's an old book about fishing called The Complete Angler, with
it's
complete spelt like
spelled that way too.
Leat. So we're just trying to sound oldie worldy, rather
like
pretentious. Yeah.
like the old Curiosity Shop spelled OLDE. Yeah, the
That's
old
it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
All
that
about
reminds
cotton
me
on.
that reminds me when you talked about the old instruments, and going back, like you said, 16th century. I like Amazing Blondell. I
Oh
like
yes.
they're one of my favorite bands, and how they sound so authentic, for that
Yeah,
old time period. Yeah, the old folk music. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
God, that's a blast from the past, isn't it? Yeah.
yes, it is. Well, how was it? How was it playing in Richard Thompson's backing band?
Wow. Well, uh, I played on a few albums first. Richard, when we met for the Morrison album, which was ended '71, Richard was just about to make his own first solo album since he left Fairport, Henry the Human Fly, and so he asked me if I'd play on some of the tracks on that. So all the recording had been done, and I was overdubbing, on 3 or 4 songs. And then for a few years, he asked me to play on his albums before we actually played live. So I played, I can't remember exactly how many. The first couple of albums he made with Linda Thompson.
Yeah.
I played on, and then in 1975 he did a gig with Linda at the in London, at one of the big concert halls in London, and he asked me if I'd go and play, and it was fantastic. So that was with Dave Mattox on drums, Dave Pegg on bass, and me and Richard and Linda. So it was quite a small unit, and I was, flying by the seat of me pants because I was used to playing dance tunes, Morris tunes with 8 bars, 8 bars long, and then repeat. And I knew some of the songs from the albums that I'd played on, and obviously we rehearsed stuff. And then for an encore, he said, "Oh, we'll do blah blah." He said it's just a 12 bar, and I'd never heard of the phrase 12 bar. So what on earth's a 12 bar? What does that mean? All the folk dance tunes that I know have got 8 bars.
8 bars.
And he said, "Oh, you'll be fine." So we're there going on for an encore, and I thought, I'm trying to, what 12 bars? That's madness. And I realised it, it's a rock and roll sequence, and so I just about worked, I was playing away, just about worked out what the 12 bars were, and then he nods me to take a solo, so I'm going, ah! I think it's called "It'll Be Me" or something like that. But when you're a guitarist,
Yeah.
this is the easy stuff, But
Right.
on the things that I play, it was baptism of fire. And
Right.
by the end of the song, I worked out what 12 bars meant. But God Almighty, it was terrifying.
Threw you in at the deep end.
Yeah,
Wow.
fantastic experience. And then I went on to play with him live quite a lot over the next sort of 10 years or so, 12 years, and we did quite a few tours and on album, and there's quite a few live recordings have come
Yeah.
out and since with me in the band. I just loved it.
Yeah.
We got on well. The music was fascinating. Really stretched me musically, and I got the chance to sort of flex my rock and roll chops a bit, in a very un-Morris dancey kind of way. It was wonderful. I absolutely loved it. We
Right.
did two massive long tours in North America, USA and Canada,
Yeah.
in 86 and 88, I think it might have been.
Yeah.
The 2 month, first time we came, it was a 2 month tour. So we're all, by the end of it, we're all completely delirious.
Yeah.
Road fever. But it was quite fantastic experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's as his touring band kind of was changing, and he broke up with Linda and all that sort of stuff, and things changed. So I gradually sort of got, the phone rang less and less, and the later recordings that I was on, they were just like little overdubs here and there, and having played with him live a lot and done some live work in the studio as well.
Yeah.
It was rather frustrating not to be more involved, and also, I was quite busy with my own work in other fields, and so I wasn't always available if he did get in touch. So gradually that sort of fizzled out. And strangely enough, the last couple of years we've been in discussion about the idea of possibly playing together again, but it hasn't worked out because two years ago, Richard was playing at Cropredy, the Fairport Convention annual summer festival in Oxfordshire, and I was going to be playing there with a band. Well, I expect you've got it on your list. I've been singing with a band called Home Service,
Yeah. Yeah.
a folk rock band, and the band was going to be playing there, and for various reasons, I ended up not being able to go. My car died on me, and we were going to have a rehearsal, and perhaps this is a tale we should go into later on, but I didn't go. So Richard and I had got as far as working out a set for me to join him, and I wasn't there in the end. And then this year he's done a 70th birthday concert, 75th birthday concert in the Albert Hall in London, and he got in touch saying, would I join him for a couple of numbers? I hope you haven't got a gig in Scunthorpe, he said. And Scunthorpe is a place in the north of England where there's a holiday camp, and so it's kind of a bit of a joke, oh, I've got a gig in Scunthorpe, it's kind of end of the world sort of place. But I had a gig not in Scunthorpe, but in Lincoln, which is quite close to Scunthorpe. So I had to turn down the Royal Albert Hall with Richard this year, which is really
Oh, oh, that's unfortunate. But yeah, but hopefully you guys will get
I
together
hope
again.
so. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I'd love to play them again because it was
yeah,
just the best thing ever.
yeah. Well, he's quite popular here in the States. He has
Yeah,
been
yeah.
some time. Well, we'll talk about how you came to play with Steeleye Span, and you played on a couple of recordings. Yeah,
Yes, yes. So that's thanks to Martin Carthy. I worked with Martin in the Albion Country Band in 1973, and then he had been in an early version of Steeleye Span before that with Ashley and Maddy Pryor and others, and then Peter Knight and Bob Johnson, who had been in Steeleye through all their global hits, all around My Hat, etc.,
yeah,
Gaudete, uh, they'd had enough and wanted to leave. Well, in fact, they left, and the band was under contract to do one more album for the record company, and they asked Martin if he would rejoin to honour the contract. And Martin, bless his cotton socks, he said, "Well, I'll join if John joins," which is very sweet of him. So I joined Steeleye Span, and we did the album, studio album, called, I've forgotten what it was called.
the Storm Force 10.
Storm Force 10. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
I could picture the cover. I couldn't remember what it was called. Storm Force
That's
10,
that's all
and
right.
so that honoured the contract, but it worked out slightly better than anybody was expecting. So we actually stayed together for a bit longer, and did a live album as well, which is called Live at Last.
Right.
Uh, and then we broke up. It had been a kind of short-term project to have a sort of caretaker version of the band, and we did some gigs, and it worked out so well that we stayed together a bit longer. So I was in it for about a year, and the two albums. We did a single of the Boar's Head Carol, which is a Christmas song, and it was an amazing experience. Uh, lots of men in suits in the background, doing the business side of things, which is rather spooky.
Yeah.
But fantastic, fantastic experience. And
Yes.
we did when the band had a penciled-in tour of Australia coming up. This was 1977, but it was also the first year that the Shropshire Bedlams that I had started a year or two before. We were going to dance at our first Sidmouth Folk Festival, which is the biggest folk festival, with dancing in England. And I'd arranged that we were going to go there, and it was exactly the same time that Steeleye Span wanted to go to Australia. So
Okay.
I'd put my heart and soul into this Morris team. So I said, no, you can't. We're not going to Australia. I want to dance on this by the seaside in Devonshire, and so much to everyone's disgust that we didn't go to Australia. But that was quite early on in the time I was in the band. So we did tour all around Europe, and Britain. So it was a great experience. Yeah, fantastic
Yeah.
for about a year.
Well, okay. Well, 1979. What was the stage show Lark Rise to Candleford?
Right. Uh, so this is the National Theatre in London, uh, and for a while there was a kind of within the National Theatre there was a small repertory company directed with plays directed by a man called Bill Bryden, and the house band was the Albion Band at the time, and did lots of they did quite a few shows um, in the smaller theatre there with promenade style. So there wasn't a proscenium march with a stage at the end of the room. You were just the action was all in the middle of the room, and the audience was kind of walking around you, walking around the performers.
Yeah.
And the Albion Band were in the corner playing the music. And Lark Rise to Candleford was a book by a woman called Flora Thompson about country life in an English village at the end of the 19th century, and this was a dramatisation of part of the book. So there's a play called Lark Rise, which was set at harvest time in an English village with lots of traditional music and songs, dances, and the whole of the English folk song at folk scene at one time or another was asked to go and sing. They had 2 or 3 different singers, male and female, in the thing, apart from the Albion Band. And Martin Carthy created the role, as it were, and I did it for a while. Ashley Hutchings phoned me up when Martin was on holiday and said, could I go and do it for a week? And quite a few other singers were passed through the ranks, as it were. And then, because the play had been so successful, the playwright, was a man called Keith Dewhurst, did a second play based on the same book, set at Christmas time, and that was Candleford.
Okay.
And then after that had been going for a while, the 2 plays ran in tandem, one at harvest time, one at Christmas, with lots of traditional music in, and so that was fantastic. So I was one of the gang in that for maybe a year and a half, I think. Not consistently, but they'd come and go. But I was in it for a long time. That was a lovely thing to do.
Yeah.
And that's where Martin and I separately met the trumpet player called Howard Evans, who had been roped in to augment the Albion Band, which led to something else which you might be about to discuss. Yeah.
Yes, I think so. Brass Monkey, is that
Yeah,
what you? Yeah,
right.
right.
Yeah. So when we were in Steeleye Span, Martin and I were talking to each other about the idea of having some sort of band that would a big band, a big noisy band that to present English folk music, but not using the folk rock formula. We both felt that it had been explored, as much as you could really, with Fairport and Steeleye and the other folk rock bands, and we thought there must be another way of making this music exciting and dynamic that isn't guitar, bass, and drums. And so we'd just been thinking about that in a rather vague way, and then we both met Howard, the trumpet player, who's a great bloke and a very fine musician, and very versatile and adaptable musician. And Martin was making an album, and he had asked me to play on a couple of songs, and he said he wondered whether to ask Howard to play on this trumpet, and he asked me, did I think it was a good idea? I said, well, ask him, try it out. If it doesn't work, you don't have to put it out, And Howard was happy to do it, and it worked very well. So in fact, the first time the 3 of us played together was on that album of Martin's. I can't remember what it's called, but that would be late 70s anyway. And then we thought, well, this is good. Let's do some gigs. So Martin and Howard and I did some gigs as a trio. And then eventually we added a trombone and another guy playing percussion and a bit of a mouth organ. And that became Brass Monkey, which was together playing very traditional English music, songs and tunes, for on and off for over 30 years. Great fun to do. We had never worked very extensively, but we had bursts and short tours and things. But a wonderful outfit to work with. I loved it.
Right.
We made quite a
Occasionally,
few albums. Sorry.
Right. I was going to say occasionally got together, not a permanent band. Yeah.
No,
Like that.
no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Right.
you know, the economics of having a band playing English folk music uh,
Right.
meant you couldn't do it very often.
Right.
Uh,
Well,
if you played Scottish or Irish music, you could go around the world, you
right.
know, and because every all the expat communities, you know, around the world, in North
Yeah.
America, Canada, and Australia, and all those sorts of places, they couldn't
Right.
get enough Celtic music, but nobody gave a toss about English music.
Yeah. What
So
wonder why that is. Do you have any insights of why English music hasn't become English folk music hasn't become more popular?
um, I think it's partly because England's seen as the big bad wolf, you know, in British history. Uh, it's been in Britain. The government's based in London, and in the same way that British imperialism sort of stamped around the world and squashed all sorts of local cultures and gave people a horrible, miserable time in all sorts of ghastly ways. The same thing happened in Britain with Irish and Scottish and Welsh cultures, and they were made to feel very inferior to the great British culture in London. But the in a way, the worst victim of all of this kind of imperial Britishness was English music. You know, the lower classes in England didn't get a look in,
Yeah.
and so you know, the aristocrats and army generals and ministers and whatnot were parading the great wonders of British industrial and colonial expansion. You know, uh, and not talking too much at the time about the slave trade and all of that stuff, which is, you know, filling people with horror now. Uh, but in a way, what suffered most was native English traditional music and customs because they other other nations in Britain weren't interested because they were English and, you know, associated with the sort of British government in London, and the it was the kind of the labouring classes, the labouring poor, who were keeping all this stuff alive, and they were they were the last thing anybody cared about. So it's gradually, much more recently, been a recognisable voice, if you like, the voice of English folk music. But you know, in a way, the damage is still being done, and we're still trying to recoup.
Right.
But you know, I think people who like it love it. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
people there's lots of, I mean, even in England it's still a minority thing, uh, whereas, you know, if you're Scottish or Irish or Welsh, you've got a national culture you can whistle up, and you know, at particular times of the year, you know what you're going to do, and
Right.
uh, songs and tunes and dances that you would do, like Burns Night and, you know, St Patrick's Day. In England we have St George's Day, but nobody knows what to do on St George's Day because, you know, there's no history of what do you do on St George's Day.
You go slay a dragon, don't you?
Go slay a dragon. That's it. That's right. I'll make a note of that. Yeah, slay a dragon.
Okay.
Next time it comes round. Yeah.
Right. That's well, it looks like that's been going on for some time because there's not many dragons around. So
Yeah. It's
yeah,
funny. I
you're
just This
doing it.
one's just gone past the window actually. But
Okay. Yeah. You guys are doing a good job
yeah,
ridding the country
yeah.
of
I might have to
dragons.
just nip out and slay it. Yeah, yeah,
That's only one.
yeah.
Uh, well, well, in the intro, I mentioned a lot of the artists that you've recorded with. One in particular, I'd like to hear about, Pere Ubu. How did you come to work with this band?
Okay. So the singer with Pere Ubu is David Thomas,
Right.
American guy who lives in England.
Yeah.
But David is a very odd person. I mean, he was the singer with Pere Ubu. He's a huge Richard Thompson fan, and he also loves squeeze boxes, and he plays the melodeon himself, which is a small button accordion. And he turned up at a gig when I was playing in Richard's band, and he just asked me if I would do a recording session with him. Uh, and I think I played on two Pere Ubu albums. I can't remember now. It was very strange stuff. I didn't really understand, the music of it, and it's very kind of avant-garde or
Avant-garde.
avant-garage, I think he used to describe.
Yeah.
Uh, and in fact, he also asked me to do some live gigs with him. So not with Pere Ubu, but there was him and the drummer. Goodness, I've forgotten his name. The drummer with Pere Ubu, I think Chris somebody. And we did a tour. We did a few gigs. We did a tour in Germany by train with the three of us, and it was most peculiar because he's got a kind of very unusual singing voice.
Yeah.
It's quite high, and it's not what you would call a very musical voice. He puts the songs across. He's an incredible performer, but it's very kind of abstract approach to singing, and the music is just bonkers. Funny time signatures and tricky stuff.
Yeah.
And amazing, very challenging stuff for me. But a lot of it, wasn't kind of tied to a key, so I could kind of just play anything really. But
Right.
I got on. It was great fun to do. Got on well with him and Chris, and we did a few gigs, so that was fun to do. And then I can't remember at which point the Pere Ubu sessions came in, but yes, it was a real sort of sidestep from what I would normally expect to find myself doing. I have done a lot of recording sessions for, as it were, mainstream pop stuff, mainly of people I've never heard of, and mainly because they've heard me play with Richard.
Yeah. Right.
So I've ended up in all sorts of strange settings with people I didn't know and music I didn't quite get, but
Yeah.
I just did my best, and usually it's sort of I'd come up with something. But yeah, interesting stuff.
Yes. Yes. Well, you're pretty versatile. You gotta give yourself that a little pat on the back. To
Yeah.
be able to play with a wide variety of artists like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Not just in the folk genre. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's great to have the chance to do that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and I think once my outlook had broadened through playing with Richard and playing Richard's music, and he'd include a bit of rock and roll and Cajun and what have you.
Yeah.
Uh, um, so it's great to kind of discover these other worlds, that might have been close to me. And I can remember when I was on tour with Richard in North America when Paul Simon's Graceland album came out.
Oh, yeah.
And we were traveling around in a tour bus together, all the band, a 6-piece band, and crew, and the cassette. This was in the days of cassettes. Paul Simon's Graceland was on the cassette at least once a day, And I can remember the bass player saying to me, "Wow, this is going to be good for you," because it opens with accordion, da
Yeah.
da 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 da, on two accordions. I said, yes, so lots of squeeze box on the album. So he said, "Oh, this is going to be great for you," and
Yeah.
I did get a lot of work, to asked to play on a lot of albums around that time,
In '97, you formed your own band
Right?
and recorded a couple of albums. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Why did I do that? It came about slightly odd the way it came about. I did a radio session for the BBC. There's still a weekly folk music program on BBC Radio, and the producer of the program asked me if I would get together a large ensemble to play English folk music. And it came about because this is when I was still working with Sue Harris,
Yeah.
and and there was a thing for a few years. There was an event called the European Broadcasting Union Folk Music Festival, which took place in a different country every year, and all the European radio stations would send an act, to wherever it was. So this year it was in Norway, and Sue and I were the act to represent England. And there were lots of groups of all kinds and all sizes from all around Europe, including a very exotic ensemble from Turkey called the Turkish Radio Folk Music Ensemble. And there are loads of them, 2 singers, and they were sensational. And for a joke, I said to the producer, I said, you ought to commission me to get a band like this together doing English stuff. And he looked at me very seriously and he said, that's not a bad idea, he said. So I got a 10-piece band together of various, people who I knew were expert at doing traditional English music, just instrumental stuff. And I arranged and we rehearsed about 6 or 7 tunes, and did it, put it out as a radio, as a session on the folk music program. And then we thought, well, this is good. This is a good thing. Let's do it live. So I organised a few live gigs, but it's quite unwieldy. There are about 12 people.
Yeah.
And Sue was one of them, Sue Harris, and we weren't getting on very well by then. And 1 or 2 of the other people had sort of rather complicated professional or personal lives. So in the end, it all rather fell to bits. So to honour the gigs that we'd set up, I said, well, let's have a smaller band. I'll do Morris on wheels with a folk rock outfit. So I got Michael Gregory and Graham Taylor, who had been in the Albion Band, who I'd played with before at the theatre and other places, and Paul Burgess, who is a traditional folk fiddler, but also plays very flashy Baroque recorder as well, and bass player. We had the perfect bass player, Dave Berry. He could play double bass, electric bass guitar, or tuba. And
Or
so
tuba.
it was quite a versatile outfit, and we did, so we did some of the stuff that I'd recorded, like Morris on, The Complete Dancing Master, which we never had played live. I did 1 or 2 things from the Albion Country Band, which had only been together for quite a short time. A couple of things I'd done with Steeleye Span, which again had only done live. We were only going at it live for less than a year, and a few other bits and bobs, and it was great fun. I thought it would be fantastic, but it was at a time when the English folk music magazine called Folk Roots was really taking the mickey out of folk rock and slagging it off as a real has-been thing. And I thought we still had something to offer. It was nice revisiting all that stuff for me, and I worked hard at it, and it was a great band, but we didn't get that many gigs, and in the end they sort of fizzled out. We did a live album and we did a studio album, and by the time the studio album came out, our gigs had completely dried up, so we never did the stuff off the studio album at all. So it's a kind of bittersweet thing for me. I sort of poured all my energies into it, and lost quite a lot of money, I suppose, as a project, because I wanted to pay the band a decent wage, because they're all top-notch musicians, and it didn't really take off in the way I would have hoped. But and the records have now been deleted, but at least they're still out there somewhere if you want to hear what it was like.
Do you ever hear from any fans of from your band? Do you ever hear any emails or anything from that time period?
Occasionally somebody gets in touch out of the blue, saying,
Yeah.
Usually to say they've heard this track and what record is it on and where can I sell it to them, and I say it's on this record which was deleted 12 years ago. Bad luck.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Right. Right.
that's the commonest thing that fans write in and ask about a particular song they've heard or tune or something, and it's very frustrating because CD sales are so kind of delicate at the moment, and people are downloading or streaming and stuff instead. CD, the live CD is kind of disappearing fast. So records that are very dear to me are being deleted left, right, and centre. So I've still got a few available, but it's a real shame that You know, if I wanted to have some music that I really like, I'd still want to buy a CD myself, you know, because I like holding the thing and I like
Right.
reading the notes, you know. But
The notes, yeah, I do
yeah,
too.
and you can, you know, in the folk music world, the background notes are quite a crucial part of your listening
Yes.
experience. You know, you want to know where a song comes from or why it's being done like this, you know. And
Yeah.
that's a real shame in the world, you know. And people say, oh, CDs are getting sexy again, you know, but
Yeah.
it hasn't manifested itself in all the records being reproduced.
No, no, that hasn't happened quite yet. Well,
No.
we can only hope. You
Yeah,
never know. Well,
yeah,
well, in 2010, you were named Musician of the Year in the BBC Radio 2 Folk Awards.
I was.
Yeah, yeah, that must have been a proud moment.
Yes and no. You know, it's stopped now. You know, and the BBC had the Folk Music Awards, and it sounds very churlish to say so, but when they started doing the Folk Music Awards, I can't remember when it started. I thought it was a ridiculous idea. You know, it's like you know how do you compare a brilliant violin, you know, a brilliant fiddle player with a brilliant bagpipe player? You know, they're just different. How can you say one's better than the other? And how can one song be better than another song? You know, they're just different, and everyone's doing their best. So I always thought it was a bit naff. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't say so, but I used to let people know by not going to it. Um,
Okay.
and then you know, and then and for a while it was the same people getting the same awards every year. You know, so I thought, well, what's the
Yeah.
point? And then I got one, and
Yeah.
um, uh, so I couldn't quite believe it really. And unfortunately, I had a medical appointment. I'd injured my eye. I'd I'd pushed my eye too hard when I was doing some manual labour, and I had to have an operation on my eye to try and sort it out. And it had been postponed two or three times. You know, with our English National Health Service, everything gets put off several times, and this was like a third or fourth chance. And if I didn't take this appointment, uh, I would have had to go back to the back of the queue for another 2 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
this was the day of the folk awards, so I
Yeah.
didn't go. I sent a friend to pick it up for me, and I sent a speech, but I wasn't actually there. So you know, it was the best non-appearance. But yeah, it's a lovely thing to happen. You know, a nice pat on the back for
Right.
one's efforts, and you know that those folk awards have stopped happening completely now.
Right.
But you know, it's a very pleasant to be recognised, you know, by one's peers, as it were.
By your peers. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
for what you know
That
that
you're
you can have. Yeah,
respect. Yeah. So there's a fair bit of ambivalence there towards it.
yeah,
I can understand. Well,
yes,
well, talk about Kirkophany now with your four sons. Now that is
yeah.
true, right?
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I got four sons. Sue and I had four children, all born in Shropshire. So they were born between 1975 and 1984. So they're all now in their 40s, all grown men with their own families and stuff. Uh, so they grew up with music going on all around them while they were kids. You know, Sue and I were playing music all the time, either ourselves or playing records, and playing music and singing was just something that was a natural part of life for them, you know, as it had been for me when I was a kid. You know, everyone was just singing and playing music all around me, and so uh, they all played various instruments. We had a piano in the house, so they've all had a go on the piano. Uh, um, Benji is the oldest one is called Joby. He played guitar, learnt guitar at primary school, had piano lessons, plays the bass guitar in a sort of a school band with his friends. Still plays guitar and bass guitar now. Benji is the second one. He's a professional musician, plays guitar, bouzouki, mandolin, banjo, piano. Had trumpet lessons for a while. Um, uh, and sings and writes songs. But they all sing as well. Um, Benji was the guitar player in the band Bellahead, who are having a reunion tour this year, so he's
Oh,
still
okay.
busy. He was in Steeleye Span for a couple of years as well, uh, keeping his father's seat warm. um, uh, and then George is the third one. He plays melodeon and mouth organ, kind of bluesy mouth organ, and the youngest one is called Fergus. He plays boogie woogie piano and jazz on the piano, and he plays drums with the Ceilidh Band, and he also plays a bit of guitar. So they've all been through the Morris team as younger people. They all live miles away now, so getting together is quite a tricky business. But when we can, 2 or 3 times a year, we get together and play for dancing, and it's a wonderful thing to do, playing with your own offspring, and make very lively dancing music, with 5 of us. I call the dances, so I play accordion and teach the dancing, and the rest of them sort of mucking behind. It's a wonderful thing to do.
Well,
Yeah.
who of your sons is the best dancer?
uh, uh, that's a tricky one. I'd say Benji's the fittest. He's a real keep fit fanatic. He runs and he does lots of wild swimming every day,
Yeah.
and he's very keen to be fit and healthy,
Yeah.
and so he's probably the best, I would
Yeah.
say. He was the leader of the team for a while when he was much younger. He doesn't live close enough to come that often these days. Uh, but they've all done it for quite a lengthy time in their youth, and they'll come and have a go when they can, these
Right.
days.
Right. Right. Well, like you said, Benji's really made a name for himself in the
Yeah.
folk genre too,
Yeah, it's
as well.
fabulous to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing really well. Yeah.
Yes, he has. Well, anything else? We're kind of coming to a close here. John, that you'd like to mention or plug or uh, give your
Um,
two cents or more than 2 cents for?
yeah. It's hard to kind of remember what do I do? What am I supposed to be talking about? So it's great that you've got all the questions because I can respond to answer a
Right.
question if
Right.
you know if asked. I think something uh, in the past as a performer in the folk clubs and on the folk scene, I've done a few sort of themed shows. So the first thing I did was a Christmas one, which I still do every December because there's a huge rich repertoire of songs and tunes associated with midwinter and Christmas. Some of it's quite pagan, some of it is Christian carols and stuff. And I've been doing that every year for a long time. And then an agent I was with for a while said you ought to do a show that would work any time of the year, not just a Christmas thing. So I'd been on a television program which was filmed quite near where I live in Shropshire about Victorian farming, and they were trying to recreate farming life as it would have been at the end of the 19th century. And there's a historic working farm not far from here.
Oh,
So I
okay.
used to go along to that on this television program, and I'd sort of waffle on about traditional folk music and customs and things, if it fitted in with what they were working on. And in traditional English folk music, a huge bulk of the repertoire is about the countryside and farming life.
Right.
And so there's lots of stuff you can draw on. So I started doing it, and then I'd been on telly doing this. So I started doing a show called The Victorian Farmer's Year in Song, which was just going through the year, excuse me, going through the year, picking out songs related to farming and the turning of the year. So that was I still do that as well. That's fun to do. And then in 2014, I did a show of songs from the two world wars to commemorate, 100 years since the First World War started. And a pal of mine had put on events locally. We have a thing called Remembrance Day, which is second weekend in November, where we remember the fallen and all the misery that wars have created and what have you. And there's a huge national ceremony in London that the royal family go to and everything. The Queen, now the King, they all go to that. And a pal of mine had done this little show, a little evening every year to mark this occasion. And he'd always ask me to sing some songs to go with whatever the topic was that year. And so I had quite a lot of songs from the two world wars that I'd kind of mugged up and could do and never used. So then I put a show together called Tunes from the Trenches, songs from the two world wars. And now this year I'm now working on a thing called 200 Years of the Squeeze Box, because the various squeeze box instruments I play all appeared in their earliest forms in the 1820s. So I thought, aha, 200 years, and I can play any old piece of music from the last 200 years and play on the things that I play, and it'll be a kind of authentic authentic little piece. So I'm working on that at the moment. So that's still to come. And that'll be kind of stretching my wings a bit, some
Yeah.
classical music, light music, signature tunes, nostalgic sort of themes, a bit of rock and roll, it's a Cajun and Zydeco, just stuff that I think I can get away with. And I suppose my other main strand is that in England we have a fantastic tradition of carol singing.
Yeah.
Like all Christian countries do, but in Sheffield, in the north of England, when the Church of England, in the middle of the 19th century, the Church of England, the established church, threw out the local musicians and church bands, in the countryside. There'd be a band playing for the village dance on a Saturday night, and the same people would play for church music on Sunday morning. And they were a bit rowdy and uncontrollable, and the church got rather fed up with it and chucked them out. And they were doing this lovely old repertoire with lots of fuguing tunes, rather like in the style of Handel and some of the 18th century stuff. And in this particular part of northern England, they started singing the old repertoire at Christmas time in the pubs. So rather than sing it in church with a church band and being frowned upon by the church authorities, they thought, oh, we'll stuff this. And they went and sang them in the pubs instead. And 200 years later, it's still happening. It's still going strong in this fantastic old style of singing with a few drinks in your hand. It's an amazing thing. And has become quite a popular strand of what kind of folkies do at Christmas time. And I started up a carol singing session. I live in a town called Bishop's Castle in South Shropshire, and I started what we call Castle Carols a few years ago, based on this thing. You're doing this old style stuff. In a pub, we all have a few drinks and sing as loudly as we can. It's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah. Now,
And
I'm a big fan of history, and I'm glad you're keeping it alive. The
yeah,
things
yeah,
that you're doing.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's wonderful. I mean, I'm a big fan of history too. I know I love looking into the background of all this music and these songs
Right.
and how they came to be, how they are. But the best thing of all is that it's not just in a book or in a shelf in a library. You can
Right.
bring all this stuff to life and
Bring it to life. Yeah. Yes.
breathe,
Exactly.
breathe blood and soul into it, and just keep it going. It's such a thrill to be able to keep doing all this stuff. And it kind of cements the community together, and you feel you got your feet in the past, but you're doing it now with
Right.
with your neighbours. It's such a glorious thing, and that's the best thing about folk music, is that it gives you a sense of place and a sense of community. Um, and in these times when everyone's falling apart in so many other ways, at least you know where you live, and you know who your friends are when you get together for these songs and these dances. It's just,
Yeah.
so valuable and heartening and fulfilling. It's great to be
Right.
able to be tapping into that as part of what I do. It's wonderful.
Very, very well said. Yeah, and that sense of community, like you said, through the music and
Yeah,
keeping it, alive and
yeah,
vibrant. Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, good to you. Kudos to you, John, for
Thank
doing
you.
that.
Thanks.
Yes, and staying active in that, and still playing live. You're still
Yeah,
playing. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, the Morris team I danced with, Shropshire Bedlams, were dancing at Shrewsbury Folk Festival a week from now. We'll be dancing 4 days. We'll be knackered.
Yeah, I bet you will.
And last week I was singing at Sidmouth Folk Festival. Yeah, and I got gigs all through the winter and into next year. Yep, still at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
good for you. Good for
yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Well, well, John, it's been very enjoyable, I've got to say. And again, thanks for sharing all of your stories and going back in that time machine with me a little bit.
Oh, thank you. It's been fun. Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Yes,
Thank you for
yes,
your time. Good.
yes. Well, you're very welcome. And I like that's part of my mission, I guess, in a way, or calling, is keeping music alive by doing this. You're
Yeah,
you're definitely doing your part, and I'm doing my little bit.
yeah,
Do,
that's
you
great. Yeah, and
know.
um, uh, people don't often get the chance to hear a fairly in-depth conversation like this. You might know a name of a musician and have no idea where they come from or what their background is or why they're
Right.
driven to do what they do. So it's great to be able to spill the beans.
Yes, there you go. That's right.
Yeah.
As long as you clean up after you spill the beans,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I'll
That's
try and
okay.
remember that. Yeah.
That's
Good
okay.
tip. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you, John. And
Okay.
again, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Um,
Good. Thank you.
I will send you a copy of this, like talked about beforehand,
Sure. Yeah.
uh, and then you can post it where you'd like on
Okay.
your
Thank you.
socials.
Yeah. And
And go
I'd
ahead.
be interested to know, Greg, what if you get any reaction from people who listen in or watch or whatever. Do you
Right.
do you get people, contacting you and saying, "Oh, this was interesting. This was weird.
Yes.
Who the
Yes, I
hell is
do.
this? Where
Yes,
do you
I
find
do.
these people? That sort of stuff. Yeah.
Right. Could you talk to somebody more interesting? No.
Yeah.
No, no,
Yeah.
I've never had that one. I've never had that one. But no, I do get comments like that.
Yeah,
And
so if you can be bothered, I'd be interested to know if you get any reaction from this one.
oh yeah, and you will too, when you
Oh,
post it on.
okay,
And
okay.
I will even forward those to you, if I don't become too much of a pest,
Okay.
forwarding you the messages. But what I consider the important ones, if somebody just says, you know I like John, maybe not, but if they go a little in depth and about the history, or what
Yeah.
they saw you at some concert somewhere,
Oh, yes,
things
yeah.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are always fun. Or what the music has meant to them. Those
Yeah.
are the ones that are that I enjoy. But
Yeah.
yeah, I will. And I'll once I do have it, I ask you to periodically check the channel for
Okay.
comments.
Yeah. Oh,
You can
right,
always
okay.
do that.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, if you put that in an email, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I will do
Okay.
that. I will do
Yeah.
that.
Thank you. Yeah, great. And and encourage people to get in touch if they want to. I'm very happy for people to, get in touch. Say, John, why do you play those stupid instruments? What's wrong with you?
Well, go
Yeah.
ahead and plug your website and
Yeah.
your account. Yeah, go ahead and give us that.
Okay. So my name is John Kirkpatrick, in case you weren't listening. www.johnkirkpatrick, that's JOHNKIRKPATRICK.co.uk. There's list of gigs on there. You can buy records. Hey! Before they
Yes.
get deleted. And information about what I've done, what I'm up to, and all sorts of stuff. Pictures of me with hair, all sorts of stuff.
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you
Thanks.
again. And
Okay,
we'll be in touch. We'll be in touch. All the
great.
best to you. Okay.
Lovely.
All right.
Thanks, Greg. All the best. Bye bye. Bye
Bye bye.
bye.
All right.